Tyler had always loved his little townhouse. It wasn't anything fancy, just a cozy two-bedroom place in a quiet neighborhood where everyone pretty much minded their own business. He'd been living there for 3 years, paying his HOA fees on time, keeping his lawn neat, and never causing any trouble. Life was simple and peaceful. That is, until Patricia became the new HOA president. At first, Tyler didn't think much of it. Every HOA has someone in charge, right? But within the first week of Patricia taking over, he noticed something was off. She wasn't just doing her job. She was on a mission. It started small. Tyler came home from work one Tuesday to find a bright orange violation notice stuck to his front door. His heart sank as he read it. Apparently his mailbox was the wrong color. He stood there staring at his perfectly normal black mailbox, the same one that had been there since he moved in. According to the notice, it was supposed to be midnight black, but his was standard black. Tyler had to read that line 3 times to make sure he wasn't imagining it. He called the HOA office the next day, figuring it had to be some kind of mistake. The woman who answered sounded sympathetic, but helpless. "I'm sorry, Mr. Chen, but Patricia is very particular about following the rules," she said quietly. Tyler could hear the exhaustion in her voice. "My advice? Just repaint it. It's easier than fighting her on it." So Tyler repainted his mailbox. He went to the hardware store, bought a can of paint labeled Midnight Black, and spent his Saturday afternoon fixing a problem he didn't even know existed. He thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. 2 days later, another violation notice appeared. This time, his welcome mat extended 2 inches beyond the acceptable threshold limit. Tyler didn't even know there was an acceptable threshold limit for welcome mats. He measured it himself with a tape measure, and sure enough, the mat stuck out just slightly past the edge of his small front porch. He moved the mat back. Problem solved, right? Wrong. The violations kept coming. His trash cans were visible from the street for 15 minutes past the pickup time. His garden hose wasn't coiled neatly enough. There was a small smudge on his front window. Each violation came with a fine, usually $25 or $50, and each one felt more ridiculous than the last. But what really got to Tyler wasn't just the violations. It was the way Patricia delivered them. She would show up at his property 2, sometimes 3 times a week, always with her phone out, taking pictures of everything: his front door, his windows, his driveway, his plants. She'd walk slowly around his townhouse, examining every inch like a detective at a crime scene. Tyler started noticing a pattern. She'd come by early in the morning before he left for work, or in the evening right after he got home. Sometimes she'd even show up on weekends when he was trying to relax. He'd look out his window, and there she'd be, standing in front of his house with her phone raised, snapping photos. It was creepy. More than creepy, actually. It was harassment. One Saturday morning, Tyler was watering his plants when Patricia appeared out of nowhere. She walked right up to his property line, pulled out an actual ruler from her purse, and started measuring his grass. Tyler watched in disbelief as this woman got down on her knees and measured the height of his lawn with a ruler. "Can I help you with something?" Tyler called out, trying to keep his voice friendly despite his frustration. Patricia looked up at him with cold eyes. "Your grass is 3¼ inches tall. The maximum allowed height is 3 inches. You'll be receiving a violation notice." Tyler felt his jaw drop. "You're joking." "I don't joke about HOA regulations, Mr. Chen." She stood up, brushed off her knees, and made a note on her clipboard. "You have 48 hours to correct this issue." That's when Tyler realized he wasn't dealing with someone who just took their job seriously. He was dealing with someone who had found a tiny bit of power and was drunk on it. He started asking around the neighborhood, carefully at first. He'd chat with neighbors while checking his mail or taking out the trash. What he learned made his blood run cold. Patricia had been targeting people for months. The Johnsons down the street had moved out after she fined them nearly $2,000 for various violations. The elderly couple in Unit 12 had stopped using their front porch because Patricia complained that their rocking chairs were unapproved furniture items. But nobody wanted to fight her. Nobody wanted to be the one to stand up and say, "This is wrong," because they were all afraid of becoming her next target. Well, too late for Tyler. He was already the target. Things got worse when Tyler decided to repaint his front door. He was tired of the boring beige color and wanted something more cheerful. He went through the HOA handbook carefully, found the list of approved colors and chose a nice blue shade that was specifically listed as acceptable. He bought the paint, spent a whole Sunday making his door look beautiful, and felt pretty good about it. Monday morning, there was a violation notice waiting for him. Tyler's hands shook as he read it. According to Patricia, his door was the wrong shade of blue. It was azure blue when it should have been coastal blue. Tyler looked at the paint can, then at the handbook, then at the violation notice. The color was listed right there in black and white as approved. He called the HOA office again. This time a different person answered. "Look," the man said, lowering his voice. "Between you and me, Patricia makes up half this stuff. But she's the president, and the board doesn't want to deal with her, so they just let her do whatever she wants. My suggestion? Keep your head down and wait for her term to end." Keep his head down? Tyler had been keeping his head down. He'd been following every rule, repainting things, moving things, fixing things that weren't even broken. And it wasn't enough. It would never be enough for Patricia. That night, Tyler couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to every little sound outside. Around 11 o'clock, he heard footsteps on his front porch. His heart started racing. He grabbed his phone and opened the doorbell camera app that he'd installed a few weeks earlier. There on his screen was Patricia. At 11 o'clock at night, she was standing at his front door trying the doorknob. Actually trying to open his door. Tyler's blood went cold. He watched as she rattled the handle, found it locked, then stepped back and peered through his front window, her hands cupped around her face to block out the light. This wasn't about HOA rules anymore. This was something else entirely. Something that made Tyler realize he wasn't just dealing with an overzealous HOA president. He was dealing with someone who had crossed a serious line, and things were about to get much, much worse. Tyler didn't sleep much that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Patricia's face pressed against his window, her hands cupped around her eyes like she had every right to peer into his home at 11 o'clock at night. He kept checking his doorbell camera footage, rewinding it, watching it again, making sure he hadn't imagined the whole thing. But no, it was real. She'd really been there, trying his doorknob, looking through his windows. Tyler saved the footage immediately, backing it up to 3 different places. Something told him he was going to need it. The next morning, Tyler was exhausted and jumpy. He kept looking over his shoulder as he left for work, half expecting Patricia to jump out from behind a bush. The whole day at the office dragged on while his mind raced with questions. What was she looking for? What did she want? And more importantly, what was she going to do next? He got his answer the following week. Tyler came home to find a thick envelope taped to his door. Not a regular violation notice this time. This was something official, sent by certified mail, with the HOA's lawyer's name on the return address. His hands trembled as he opened it. The letter claimed that Tyler was illegally subletting his property. According to Patricia's investigation, he had unauthorized occupants living in his townhouse in violation of HOA rules and local housing regulations. The letter demanded immediate access to inspect his home and threatened legal action if he didn't comply. Tyler read the letter 3 times, his confusion turning to anger. Subletting. He lived alone. He'd always lived alone. There were no roommates, no tenants, no unauthorized occupants. This was a complete fabrication, and Patricia knew it. He called the HOA lawyer's office immediately. The receptionist put him through to a junior attorney who sounded bored until Tyler started explaining the situation. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Mr. Chen," the attorney said carefully, "I'm going to be honest with you. This complaint came directly from Mrs. Whitmore. She said she had evidence of multiple people entering and leaving your property at odd hours." "Evidence?" Tyler's voice rose. "What evidence?"
I live alone.
"This is harassment." "I understand your frustration," the attorney said, and he actually did sound sympathetic. "But as the HOA president, Mrs. Whitmore has the authority to request inspections if she believes there's a violation occurring. So, she can just make things up and you have to investigate?" Another pause. Look, between us, you're not the first person to have issues with Mrs. Whitmore. But legally, we have to follow up on formal complaints. However, you have rights too. You don't have to let anyone into your home without proper notice, a legitimate reason, and you have the right to be present during any inspection. Tyler thanked him and hung up. He sat on his couch, the letter still in his hand, trying to process what was happening. This had gone way beyond petty HOA violations. Patricia was now making up serious accusations that could affect his housing situation, maybe even his legal standing. And for what? Because she enjoyed having power over people? Because he hadn't just rolled over and moved out like the others? He decided to talk to his neighbors again, but this time more directly. That evening, he knocked on the door of the unit next to his. An older man named Robert answered, someone Tyler had chatted with a few times in passing. "Robert, I need to ask you something," Tyler said. "Has Patricia been bothering you too?" Robert's face changed immediately. He looked left and right, then gestured for Tyler to come inside quickly. Once the door was closed, Robert let out a heavy sigh. "She's a nightmare," Robert said quietly. "My wife and I have been thinking about selling just to get away from her. Last month she fined us $300 because our bird feeder was attracting too many birds." "Too many birds? Can you believe that? Has she ever tried to come into your house?" Robert's expression grew dark. "Twice. Both times she claimed there was an emergency inspection needed. The first time we let her in because we didn't know any better. She went through every room, took pictures of everything, then cited us for having the wrong color curtains in our bedroom. Our bedroom, Tyler. The second time, we refused to let her in and she threatened to fine us for obstruction of HOA duties." Tyler told Robert about the subletting accusation. Robert's eyes widened. "She did the same thing to the Hendersons before they moved out," Robert said. "Claimed they were running some kind of illegal business from their home. It was completely false, but by the time they proved it, they'd spent thousands on lawyers and were so stressed they just left." As Tyler walked back to his townhouse, his phone buzzed. Another email from the HOA. Patricia was demanding access to his home for an inspection this Friday at 2 p.m. The email stated clearly, "With or without your consent as per emergency HOA bylaws regarding illegal occupancy." That phrase made Tyler's stomach turn. With or without consent? Could she really do that? He immediately called a lawyer the next morning. Not the HOA's lawyer, but his own. The attorney, a sharp woman named Ms. Rodriguez, listened to his whole story without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Mr. Chen, I'm going to be very clear with you," she said. "What this woman is doing is not legal. She has no right to enter your property without your explicit permission, regardless of what she claims. These emergency HOA bylaws she's citing, I'd bet money they either don't exist or don't say what she thinks they say. So what do? Document everything. Keep recording. And do not under any circumstances let her into your home. If she tries to enter without permission, that's breaking and entering, and you should call the police immediately." Tyler felt a weight lift slightly. Finally, someone was telling him he had rights, that he could fight back. But that relief didn't last long. Over the next few days, Patricia's behavior escalated in ways Tyler couldn't have predicted. She started showing up at random times, always with her phone out, always taking pictures. But now she wasn't just photographing his property. She was trying his door handle. Multiple times. The doorbell camera caught her at 7 a.m. on Wednesday, then again at 9 p.m. on Thursday, each time checking to see if his door was unlocked. Tyler started feeling like a prisoner in his own home. He'd peek through his curtains before leaving for work, checking to see if she was out there. He'd take different routes to his car, trying to avoid her. At night, he'd lie awake, listening for footsteps on his porch, his phone always within reach so he could check the camera. His friends noticed the change in him. "You look exhausted, man," his coworker Diego said over lunch. "Everything okay?" Tyler found himself explaining the whole situation, and as he talked, he realized how crazy it all sounded. A woman harassing him over mailbox colors and grass height, making up accusations, trying to break into his house. It sounded like something from a movie, not real life. "Dude, you need to call the cops," Diego said firmly. "This is stalking. This is harassment. You have her on camera trying to break into your house." Tyler had thought about it, but part of him worried that involving the police would make things worse. What if Patricia convinced them she had some legitimate HOA authority? What if they didn't take him seriously? But Thursday night, when his doorbell camera caught Patricia trying his door handle again, this time for a full 30 seconds, jiggling it and pushing against the door, Tyler knew Diego was right. This had to stop. Friday morning, Tyler called the non-emergency police line and explained the situation. The officer who answered listened carefully as Tyler described the months of harassment, the false accusations, and the repeated attempts to access his home without permission. "And you have all this on camera?" the officer asked. "Every single incident." "Mr. Chen, I'm going to send someone over to take a report. What you're describing is concerning, especially if she's attempting to access your property without authorization." 2 officers came to Tyler's house that afternoon. He showed them everything: the months of violation notices, the threatening emails, the doorbell footage of Patricia trying his door, peering through his windows, showing up at all hours, the certified letter claiming he was subletting. The officers exchanged glances as they watched the footage. "This is pretty clear-cut harassment," one of them said. "And if she tries to enter your property without permission tomorrow, that's breaking and entering." "You said she claims she's coming at 2 p.m.? Tyler nodded. The officers looked at each other again, and Tyler saw something shift in their expressions. One of them smiled slightly. "Mr. Chen, would you be willing to let us be here when she shows up?" "Inside your home?" Tyler's heart started beating faster. "You mean, like waiting for her?" "Exactly like that," the officer said. "If she's really planning to enter your property without your consent, we'd like to be here to witness it. Sometimes people in positions of minor authority need a reality check about what they can and cannot do." For the first time in months, Tyler felt hope blooming in his chest. "Yes," he said. "Absolutely yes." The trap was set. Friday at 2 p.m. Tyler just had to make sure Patricia took the bait. Tyler barely slept Thursday night. His mind kept running through everything that could go wrong. What if Patricia didn't show up? What if she somehow knew the police would be there? What if she actually did have some legal right that nobody knew about and he ended up looking like the crazy one? But every time doubt crept in, he'd remember her face pressed against his window at 11 p.m. He'd remember the sound of his doorknob rattling as she tried to force her way in. He'd remember the fear he'd felt living in his own home for the past few months. No, he was doing the right thing. This had to end. Friday morning, Tyler woke up early and went over the plan one more time. He needed everything to look normal. Patricia had to believe he wasn't home. She had to think she could just walk right in and conduct her fake inspection without any consequences. First, he called Ms. Rodriguez, his lawyer. "It's happening today," he told her. "The police are going to be here." "Good," she said. "I'm documenting everything on my end. After today, regardless of what happens, we're filing a formal harassment complaint and pursuing a restraining order. Make sure you record everything you can safely record." Next, Tyler called a couple of his neighbors, the ones he'd learned were also fed up with Patricia, Robert next door, and a younger couple named the Taylors who lived 3 units down. "If you hear anything unusual around 2 o'clock, I might need you as witnesses," Tyler told them carefully. He didn't want to explain the whole plan in case word somehow got back to Patricia, but he wanted people aware that something was happening. Robert understood immediately. "We'll be watching," he said. About time someone stood up to that woman. At noon, Tyler started preparing his house. He positioned his laptop in his bedroom with a clear view of the living room, set to record. He double-checked that his doorbell camera was working perfectly. He made sure his phone was fully charged and ready to record if needed. Then came the hardest part, making the house look like he wasn't home. He moved his car 3 blocks away and walked back, checking over his shoulder the whole time to make sure Patricia didn't spot him. He closed all his curtains except for a few in the back where she couldn't see. He made sure no lights were on. Everything had to look like he'd gone to work for the day. At 1:30, his doorbell rang. Tyler's heart jumped into his throat. Was Patricia early? But when he checked the camera, he saw the 2 police officers from yesterday, both in plain clothes this time. He let them in quickly, scanning the street to make sure no one had seen. The officers looked around his living room, noting the sight lines and where they'd positioned themselves. "We'll stand right here," the taller officer, Officer Martinez, said, pointing to a spot where they'd be immediately visible to anyone who came through the front door. "We want her to see us the moment she enters. That way there's no question about what her intentions were. The other officer, Officer Kim, was looking at the door lock.
Has this lock been tampered with at all?
Not that I know of, Tyler said. But I change the deadbolt every night. During the day, it's just the regular lock. Officer Kim nodded thoughtfully. You mentioned in your report that you suspect she might have a key. Has anyone had access to your keys? Property management, maybe? Tyler's stomach dropped. He hadn't thought about that. The property management company has a master key for emergencies. They're supposed to keep it in a lockbox at their office. The officers exchanged knowing looks. We'll want to follow up on that, Officer Martinez said. If she obtained a key through false pretenses, that's another charge. They settled into position at 1:45. Tyler went to his bedroom, leaving the door cracked just enough so he could hear everything. His hands were shaking as he started the recording on his laptop. This was really happening. 2 o'clock came and went. Then 2:05. Tyler felt sweat dripping down his back despite the air conditioning. What if she'd changed her mind? What if someone had warned her? At 2:08, Tyler's doorbell camera picked up movement. His heart hammered as he watched Patricia's car pull up to the curb. But she wasn't alone. Someone was in the passenger seat. Another woman Tyler recognized as Denise Kruger, another member of the HOA board. He watched on his phone as both women got out of the car. Patricia had her usual clipboard and her phone. Denise carried a camera, a professional-looking one with a big lens. They were really planning to document this inspection. Tyler texted a quick update to the officers. 2 people, Patricia and another board member named Denise. Officer Martinez texted back, acknowledged. Stay in your room until we tell you otherwise. Through the doorbell camera, Tyler watched Patricia march up to his front door with Denise trailing behind, looking uncertain. Even from the camera angle, Tyler could see Denise didn't look comfortable. She kept glancing around nervously, while Patricia moved with absolute confidence like she owned the place. The doorbell rang. 3 loud, aggressive rings that echoed through the quiet townhouse. In the living room, the officers didn't move, didn't make a sound. Patricia's voice came through crystal clear on the doorbell speaker. HOA inspection. Mr. Chen opened the door immediately. Silence. Tyler held his breath. This is your final warning, Mr. Chen. We have the authority to enter for this inspection. More silence. Tyler could see Denise shifting uncomfortably, whispering something to Patricia. Patricia shook her head sharply and said something back. Through the door, Tyler couldn't quite make out the words, but the body language was clear. Denise was having second thoughts. Patricia was not. Then Tyler saw Patricia reach into her purse. His breath caught. She pulled out a key, an actual key to his house. Officer Kim had been right. Patricia, maybe we should come back when he's home, Denise said loud enough for the doorbell camera to pick up clearly. This doesn't feel right. We sent proper notice, Patricia said firmly. We have every right to inspect this property. He's clearly not home, which is perfect. We can document everything without his interference. Tyler felt cold fury wash over him. Without his interference? Like he was the problem? Like he didn't have rights in his own home? Patricia put the key in the lock. Tyler heard the mechanism turn. The doorknob twisted. The door began to open. Through his cracked bedroom door, Tyler watched it all unfold in real time. Patricia pushed the door open and stepped inside, Denise hesitating at the threshold. Patricia's mouth was already open, probably ready to announce their presence again when she stopped dead. The change in her face was something Tyler would remember for the rest of his life. The confidence, the arrogance, the absolute certainty that she was in the right, all of it drained away in an instant. Her face went pale. Her mouth hung open. Her eyes went wide with shock and then fear. Good afternoon, Mrs. Whitmore, Officer Martinez said calmly, his hands clasped in front of him, his stance relaxed but authoritative. We've been expecting you. Patricia made a sound almost like a gasp or a squeak. She took a stumbling step backward, nearly tripping over her own feet. Behind her, Denise let out a small scream and immediately backed away from the door. I didn't know, Denise said, her voice high and panicked. Patricia said this was legal. She said we had authority. I'm leaving, I'm not part of this. She was already rushing back toward the car, her expensive camera forgotten in her hands. But Patricia was frozen, staring at the 2 officers like she'd seen ghosts. The clipboard slipped from her hands and clattered on the floor. Officer Kim pulled out a notebook, his movements deliberate and slow. Mrs. Whitmore, he said. I'm going to need you to explain how you obtained a key to this private residence and what gave you the authority to enter without the owner's explicit permission. Tyler could see Patricia's mind working, trying to come up with something, anything that would explain this away. Her mouth opened and closed several times before any words came out. I'm the HOA president, she finally stammered. I have the authority to inspect properties for violations. Really? Officer Martinez said. Because we've reviewed the HOA bylaws with Mr. Chen's attorney, and there's nothing in there about forced entry into private residences. In fact, the bylaws very clearly state that inspections require written notice, a legitimate cause, and the homeowner's presence or explicit written consent. Patricia's face, which had been pale, now flushed red. He's been violating multiple regulations. He's subletting illegally. I have evidence. What evidence? Officer Kim asked. We'd very much like to see it. Patricia fumbled with her phone, her hand shaking so badly she almost dropped it. Tyler could see her scrolling frantically, searching for something, anything to justify her actions. Officer Martinez stepped forward slightly. Mrs. Whitmore, I think we need to continue this conversation at the station. Right now you're under arrest for breaking and entering, criminal trespass, and illegal possession of another person's property. Specifically, that key. Tyler heard the words and felt something release in his chest. It was really happening. After months of harassment, of feeling helpless, of being victimized in his own home, someone was finally holding Patricia accountable. You can't arrest me. Patricia's voice rose to a near shriek. I'm the HOA president. I was performing my duties. This is a mistake. Ma'am, please place your hands behind your back, Officer Kim said, pulling out handcuffs. That's when Patricia looked around wildly and her eyes locked on Tyler. The silence in Tyler's townhouse after the officers left with Patricia was deafening. He stood in his living room looking at the spot where she'd been standing in handcuffs just minutes ago, and tried to process what had just happened. His hands were still shaking. His heart was still racing. But underneath the adrenaline, there was something else. Relief. Pure, overwhelming relief. His phone buzzed. Then again. And again. Text messages were flooding in. Robert from next door. I saw everything. About time. Let me know if you need anything. The Taylors. That was incredible. We got it all on video if you need more evidence. Even people he barely knew from the neighborhood were reaching out. People who'd apparently been watching the whole thing unfold. Mrs. Henderson sent a long message about how Patricia had harassed her teenage grandson for skateboarding in front of his own house. A couple 3 streets over messaged that Patricia had tried to fine them for having the wrong type of flowers in their garden. The floodgates had opened. Everyone who'd been silently suffering under Patricia's reign was suddenly ready to talk. Tyler sat down on his couch and called Ms. Rodriguez. She answered on the first ring. I heard, she said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. The police contacted me. They needed confirmation about the HOA bylaws. Tyler, you did everything right, everything. What happens now? Tyler asked. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, tired and relieved and worried all at once. Now we document everything for the civil case. The criminal charges are the prosecutor's job. Breaking and entering, criminal trespass, and they're investigating how she got that key. But we're going after her for harassment, invasion of privacy, emotional distress, and abuse of her position. And Tyler, we're going to win. After he hung up with Ms. Rodriguez, Tyler's doorbell rang. For a split second, his body tensed, old fear creeping back. But when he checked the camera, it was just Robert holding 2 cups of coffee. Thought you might need this, Robert said when Tyler opened the door. And maybe some company. That was intense. They sat in Tyler's living room, the same room where Patricia had been arrested an hour earlier, and Robert told him everything. How Patricia had been terrorizing the neighborhood for almost 2 years. How she'd driven out at least 4 families with her constant violations and threats. How she'd even gone after elderly residents who couldn't keep up with her increasingly ridiculous demands. The Millers, Robert said, his voice heavy. They were in their 70s. Patricia fined them so many times for their lawn, their paint, their mailbox that they couldn't afford to stay. They'd lived here for 15 years and she drove them out in 6 months. Mrs. Miller cried when they moved. Said this was supposed to be their retirement home. Tyler felt his anger building again. Why didn't anyone report her before? We tried, Robert said. The HOA board wouldn't listen. Half of them were afraid of her. and the other half just didn't want to deal with the drama. And legally? The police said HOA disputes were civil matters unless she actually broke the law. Well, congratulations. She finally broke the law in a way nobody could ignore. Over the weekend, Tyler's phone didn't stop ringing. Neighbors he'd never even spoken to were calling, sharing their stories, offering to testify if needed. The local news somehow got wind of the story, and a reporter left 3 voicemails asking for an interview. Tyler ignored those. This wasn't about getting attention. This was about finally having peace. Monday morning, Tyler received an email from the HOA management company. The subject line read, "Emergency board meeting, your attendance requested." The meeting was scheduled for Wednesday evening. The email was vague about the purpose, but Tyler had a pretty good idea what it was about. Ms. Rodriguez advised him to attend with her present. "They're probably going to try damage control," she said, "but this is also your opportunity to make sure they know exactly what happened and that you won't tolerate any retaliation." Wednesday evening came, and Tyler arrived at the community center where HOA meetings were held. He expected maybe a dozen people. Instead, the parking lot was packed. The meeting room, which usually held maybe 20 residents, had at least 50 people crammed inside, with more standing in the hallway. Ms. Rodriguez met him at the door. "Word spread," she said simply. "People are angry. They want answers." The HOA board looked terrified. 5 people sat at a table at the front of the room, including Denise, who wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. The board president, a nervous-looking man named Harold, called the meeting to order, but his voice was barely audible over the angry murmuring of the crowd. "We're here to address the recent incident involving our former president, Patricia Whitmore," Harold began. "The board wants to make it clear that we had no knowledge of Mrs. Whitmore's illegal actions, and we do not condone—" "That's a lie," someone shouted from the back. Tyler turned to see Mrs. Henderson on her feet, her face flushed with anger. "We've been complaining about her for 2 years. I personally sent the board 6 emails about her harassment, and I never got a single response." The room erupted. People started standing up, shouting their own stories. The Taylors talked about being fined $300 for having a child's bike on their front porch. A man Tyler didn't know described how Patricia had reported his work truck to code enforcement, claiming it was a commercial vehicle, even though it was just his regular pickup that he drove to his construction job. An elderly woman tearfully explained that Patricia had threatened to put a lien on her house over unpaid fines that she couldn't afford. Harold tried to regain control, banging a gavel that nobody paid attention to. Finally, Ms. Rodriguez stood up, and something about her calm, professional presence made people quiet down. "I'm Ms. Rodriguez, Mr. Chen's attorney," she said, "and I think what everyone here is trying to say is that this wasn't an isolated incident. Patricia Whitmore engaged in a pattern of harassment and abuse of power that the board either ignored or enabled. The question now is, what is the board going to do about it?" Denise, who had been silent and pale throughout the meeting, suddenly stood up. "I resign," she said, her voice shaking. "I should have stopped her. I knew some of what she was doing was wrong, and I didn't say anything because I was afraid she'd turn on me next. I'm sorry. I resigned from the board, effective immediately." She gathered her things and walked out, and nobody tried to stop her. Harold cleared his throat. "Mrs. Whitmore has been removed from her position as president and from the board, obviously. We'll be conducting a full review of all violations issued in the past 2 years. "That's not enough," Robert said, standing up. "We need new bylaws. We need oversight. We need to make sure this never happens again. Because let me tell you, Patricia didn't get this bad overnight. She got worse and worse because nobody stopped her." The meeting went on for 3 hours. By the end of it, the board had agreed to several major changes. All violations would now require approval from at least 3 board members, not just the president. Any homeowner could appeal a violation to the full board. Inspections could only be conducted with proper notice, legitimate cause, and the homeowner present, or with written consent. And perhaps most importantly, there would be an anonymous reporting system for board misconduct. Tyler mostly stayed quiet during the meeting, letting others speak. But as people were leaving, dozens of them came up to shake his hand, to thank him, to share their relief that someone had finally stood up to Patricia. "You did what we were all too scared to do," the Taylors told him. "Thank you." Tyler drove home exhausted, but feeling something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Real hope that things might actually get better. But the story wasn't over yet. Thursday morning, Tyler received a call from Officer Martinez. "Mr. Chen, I wanted to give you an update," the officer said. "We traced how Patricia got the key to your property. She went to the property management company 6 months ago and told them she was conducting routine safety inspections. She claimed the HOA bylaws gave her emergency access rights. The property manager was new and didn't know any better, so he made her a copy." 6 months ago? Tyler felt sick. "She's had a key to my house for 6 months? I'm afraid so. The good news is the property manager is cooperating fully, and that's another charge we can add: obtaining property access under false pretenses. The prosecutor is building a strong case." "What about the subletting accusation?" Tyler asked. "Where did that even come from?" Officer Martinez sighed. "Your neighbor, Robert? She saw him coming into your townhouse a few times over the past months. Remember when you went on vacation and he watered your plants? And that time he borrowed your ladder? She apparently photographed him entering your property and decided that was evidence of unauthorized occupancy. She literally made up an entire violation based on a neighbor doing you a favor." Tyler didn't know whether to laugh or cry. All of this, months of harassment and fear, because she'd seen Robert being a good neighbor. "There's more," Officer Martinez continued. "Once word got out about the arrest, we've had 7 other homeowners come forward with complaints about Patricia. Some of them have evidence of similar harassment. The prosecutor thinks she might be willing to take a plea deal to avoid trial, but that would mean admitting guilt and accepting consequences." "What kind of consequences?" "Criminal record, probation, community essay." 2 weeks after Patricia accepted the plea deal, Tyler woke up and realized something strange. He'd checked his doorbell camera out of habit, and there was nothing. No Patricia lurking around his property. No violation notices on his door. Just a regular Friday morning with birds chirping and his neighbor's cat wandering across his lawn. It felt almost too quiet. Like his body was still waiting for the other shoe to drop, even though the threat was gone. Tyler had read about this, how trauma doesn't just disappear the moment the danger ends. Your brain keeps expecting it, preparing for it, even when it's over. But slowly, day by day, Tyler started to relax. He repainted his front door again, this time choosing a warm burgundy color that he actually liked. Not something picked from an approved list out of fear. He bought a new welcome mat, a funny one that said, "Come back with a warrant," and placed it exactly where he wanted it, 2 inches past the porch edge. Small acts of defiance that felt like freedom. The neighborhood was changing too. Harold and the remaining board members were actually following through on their promises. They'd sent out a detailed email to all residents explaining the new rules, apologizing for failing to stop Patricia's abuse, and inviting anyone who felt they'd been wrongly fined to submit an appeal. Tyler heard through Robert that over 40 families had submitted appeals. The board was reviewing each one and refunding fines that had been based on Patricia's made-up violations. The Taylors got back $300, Mrs. Henderson got back nearly $600. Even the Millers who'd moved away were contacted and offered a refund plus an apology. But not everyone was happy. About a week after the plea deal was announced, Tyler found an anonymous note in his mailbox. It was short and bitter. "You ruined someone's life over HOA rules. Hope you're proud of yourself." Tyler showed it to Robert, who just shook his head. Patricia still has friends, apparently. Or maybe it's from Patricia herself. Either way, throw it away. You didn't ruin her life. She ruined her own life by breaking the law. Robert was right, but the note still bothered Tyler. Had he ruined someone's life? Patricia was facing criminal charges, probation, community service, and a ruined reputation. Her name had been in the local news. People knew what she'd done. He called Ms. Rodriguez about it. "Should I be worried about retaliation?" "The note itself isn't a threat," she said, "but document it just in case. And Tyler, don't let anyone make you feel guilty." Patricia didn't make one mistake. She made hundreds of deliberate choices to harass, intimidate, and eventually break into your home. Those were her choices. The consequences are on her. The plea deal was finalized in court 3 weeks after Patricia's arrest. Tyler attended with Ms. Rodriguez, sitting in the back of the courtroom. Patricia stood before the judge in a gray pantsuit, looking smaller somehow, diminished. Her lawyer did most of the talking, explaining that his client accepted responsibility for her actions and was ready to move forward with the terms of the plea agreement. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, looked down at Patricia with an expression that could only be described as disappointed. "Mrs. Whitmore," the judge said, I've reviewed the evidence in this case, including the doorbell camera footage, the testimonies from multiple homeowners, and the documentation of your systematic harassment of Mr. Chen and others. What you did wasn't just illegal. It was cruel. You took a position of minor authority and weaponized it against your own neighbors. People trusted you to act in the community's best interest, and instead you terrorized them. Patricia's shoulders hunched. She nodded, not speaking. I'm accepting this plea deal, the judge continued, but understand that this will follow you for the rest of your life. You'll have a criminal record. You're banned from serving on any homeowner association board, and if you violate the terms of your probation in any way, you will serve jail time. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Patricia said, her voice barely audible. The judge signed the paperwork. Just like that, it was done. Patricia walked out of the courtroom with her lawyer, not looking at anyone, and Tyler never saw her again. But the story was far from over for the community. The local news coverage had drawn attention from other HOA neighborhoods around the city. Tyler started getting emails and messages from people in completely different communities, asking for advice on how to deal with their own abusive board members. One woman wrote, "Our HOA president fined my disabled mother for not mowing her lawn fast enough after her surgery. Reading about what you did gave me the courage to file a formal complaint. Thank you." Another message said, "I've been documenting violations for 8 months. Your story reminded me that I have rights. I'm meeting with a lawyer next week." Tyler hadn't meant to start a movement. He just wanted to live peacefully in his own home. But apparently, Patricia's story had struck a chord with people who felt helpless against petty tyrants in positions of minor power. A local news reporter finally convinced Tyler to do a short interview. He was nervous about it, worried about seeming vindictive or attention-seeking. But Ms. Rodriguez encouraged him. "Your story matters," she said, "not for revenge, but because it shows people they don't have to accept abuse. They have rights. They can fight back. That's important." The interview aired on a Tuesday evening. Tyler kept it simple, factual, focusing on the pattern of harassment and the importance of documenting everything. He emphasized that he'd tried to resolve things peacefully first, that the arrest had been a last resort after months of escalating behavior. The response was overwhelming. The news station received hundreds of comments and emails. Most were supportive, sharing similar stories of HOA abuse, but there were also critics, people who thought Tyler had overreacted, that he should have just moved or dealt with it quietly. One comment stuck with Tyler. "It's just an HOA. Was it really worth destroying someone's life over?" He found himself thinking about that comment for days. Was it just an HOA? It hadn't felt like just anything when he was lying awake at night, afraid to be in his own home. It hadn't felt minor when Patricia was trying his doorknob at 11 p.m., or when she was making up false accusations about illegal subletting. Tyler realized that the comment came from someone who'd never experienced that kind of harassment, someone who couldn't understand how cumulative it was, how each small violation built on the last until you felt trapped and powerless. He posted a response, not angry, just honest. "It wasn't just an HOA to me. It was my home, my safety, my peace of mind. She chose to take all of that away, repeatedly, deliberately. I just chose not to accept it anymore." 6 weeks after Patricia's plea deal, the HOA held a special election for a new board president. Robert decided to run, and Tyler helped him campaign. Well, campaign was a strong word. Mostly they just knocked on doors and talked to neighbors about making the community better. Robert won by a landslide. His first act as president was to establish a residents' committee that would review all HOA decisions, providing a check on board power. His second act was to reduce violation fines across the board and establish a warning system where homeowners got a friendly notice before any fine was issued. The point of an HOA should be to maintain property values and help neighbors, Robert said at his first official meeting, not to punish people or make their lives miserable. "We're going to get back to basics." Tyler noticed the change immediately. The neighborhood felt different. People were outside more, chatting with each other, not rushing to their doors in fear. Kids played in front yards without parents worrying about Patricia showing up to complain. The elderly residents who'd been practically hiding in their homes started sitting on their porches again. Mrs. Henderson invited Tyler over for tea one afternoon. Her townhouse was filled with photos of her grandchildren, and she pointed to one of a teenage boy on a skateboard. "That's my grandson Lucas," she said. Patricia tried to ban him from skateboarding anywhere in the neighborhood. Said it was a liability issue. He stopped visiting me for almost a year because he was afraid of getting his grandmother in trouble. Can you imagine? A kid afraid to visit his own grandmother? Tyler could imagine it, actually. He'd lived that fear. He's coming back this weekend, Mrs. Henderson continued, her eyes bright with tears. First time in over a year, and he's bringing his skateboard. Because nobody can tell him he's not allowed to visit his grandmother anymore. That's when Tyler understood the real impact of what had happened. It wasn't just about him. It was never just about him. Patricia had created an atmosphere of fear that had touched dozens of families in different ways. And now, slowly, that fear was lifting. The $15,000 from Patricia's settlement arrived 2 months after the plea deal. Tyler stared at the check for a long time, thinking about what to do with it. Part of him wanted to use it for something practical, to repaint his entire townhouse or upgrade his kitchen, but that didn't feel right. Instead, Tyler decided to create a legal defense fund for HOA residents. He put $10,000 into it and set up a website explaining what had happened to him and offering to help other people facing similar situations. The remaining $5,000 went to repaying his own legal fees. Within a week, 3 people had reached out asking for help. Tyler connected them with Ms. Rodriguez and other lawyers who specialized in HOA disputes.